All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name's Justin Carter. I'm a project associate from the Center for Rural Affairs. I'm joining you from my home on the land of the Omaha people in what is today called Omaha, Nebraska. If you're not familiar with the Center for Rural Affairs, we're a small nonprofit. We're located in the town of Lyons, Nebraska. It's a little town in the northeast corner of the state. We do a wide variety of work with rural communities. So everything from small business development to rural policy advocacy and quite a bit of grassroots food and farm work. So a lot of beginning farmer assistance, land transition assistance, local food systems work. We have staff and food systems projects on the lands of the Omaha as well as Santee Sioux Nation. So welcome to our next session of Models of Native Ownership. We're blessed tonight to have Leah Penniman with us from Soulfire Farms to tell us what they're doing. And of course, we're blessed once again to have Pamela standing with us to be our facilitator. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pamela. Yeah, thank you.
It's such a beautiful day here. I'm standing in Minnesota, Makoche, and the land of the Dakota people. Even though I'm a citizen of Cherokee Nation, this is where I'm standing and where I work. We are so honored to have Leah Penniman here, and I've had the privilege of listening to her before, and just what an amazing woman. I mean, when I had a chance to meet her before, we were talking about how hard it is to blaze a trail. And she's making a pathway for other cooperatives of color to come in behind her. And what I love is her commitment to social justice, to food equity, to equity for our communities of color, and making ways for all of our people to be able to feed themselves and live in a good way. And so with that, I would like to have Leah join us, and Wado.
Greetings, everyone. Such an honor to be here. This is Leah Penniman. I use all pronouns. I'm the farm manager and one of the founding co-directors at Soulfire Farm. We are on unceded Stockbridge-Munsee Mohican territory in upstate New York, on 80 acres of beautiful mountain lands that we care for. And tonight, I'm excited to talk to you a bit about our journey towards cooperative land stewardship, feeding the community, reviving and building upon afro-indigenous farming methods, and leave space for conversation. And so hopefully as I'm speaking, you will be inspired to type questions in the chat or hold your questions in your heart so that after I share a bit, there is a chance for some exchange. So hopefully you can see this screen here. And I want to talk about the journey of Soulfire Farm on this land. And first want to invite us to take a moment to think about our ancestors and the people who made it possible for us to be here as living, breathing, feeling people. None of us got here by ourselves. All of us are standing on the shoulders of those who came before. And the ancestor that I want to call in today is my great-great-great-great-grandmother, Susie Boyd, who was kidnapped from her homeland. She's an indigenous Dahomey person, West Africa, who was kidnapped from her homeland and brought to so-called South Carolina to grow food to feed the settler colonial state. And she, like so many other women during that time and place, gathered up the seeds from her land, the okra, the cowpea, the millet, the black rice, the agusi melon, and braided it into her hair as insurance for an uncertain future. And I pay homage to those who had foresight to carry up the seeds, whether it was bundled in their skirts or in their hair, and invite you in this moment to think of an ancestor who had foresight for you and type their names into the chat. So let's take a moment now and invite our ancestors into the space with us. Go ahead and type that into the chat. And also, if you are, if you can mute if you're not speaking, that's helpful too. So as we are taking a moment to welcome our ancestors, also want to, of course, acknowledge the lands that we're on. As I said, we're on Mohican territory here, and I'll get into it a bit later, but have done a lot of work, solidarity work between the Black and Indigenous community here that we will share. But encourage you also, if you, I understand most of you are on your lands, are native to Turtle Island, but for those who are not, to do some work thinking about whose land you're on and what solidarity can look like. So I'm going to start a little walk through history, our history, by reading this quote from Julius Nyerere, who was the former president of Tanzania. And he said, "To us in Africa, land was always recognized as belonging to the community. Each individual within our society had a right to use the land because otherwise they could not earn their living, and one cannot have the right to life without also having a right to some means of maintaining life. But the Africans' right to land was simply the right to use it. They had no other right to it, nor did it occur to them to try and claim one." And so this perspective, right, that the land is not a commodity, that the land is something to be cared for, to be used, to be shared, to take residency upon, but cannot be owned, is an Indigenous idea across many continents. And I mentioned earlier my ancestral grandmother, Susie Boyd, who was one of the women who braided seeds into her hair. It's important to note that it wasn't just the physical seed that was braided. Also braided was a lot of knowledge about how to be in right relationship with the land. So many of the technologies that we think of as organic, as regenerative farming, as cooperatives, come out of our people's traditions. They're not new. So, you know, we can think of the soil testing by texture and by taste of the Yoruba people. We can think of how Cleopatra in Egypt in 59 BCE was vermicomposting with worms. How women in Ghana and Liberia for 1,000 years have been making dark earth compost with ash and biochar. We can think about how the very first co-ops are Indigenous institutions. The very first credit unions are Afro-Indigenous institutions. Food preservation, cover cropping, all these technologies, right, coming from our community. So this was in very stark contrast to the predominant way of thinking of the settler colonizers who pillaged the lands of my ancestors and Turtle Island and many other lands, you know, across the world, and continue to do so. So, you know, the philosophy of land ownership and extraction was summarized by Pope Nicholas, who wrote back in 1452 in the Papal Bull that white Christians should go and invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever and enemies of Christ, and reduce them to perpetual slavery, and to apply to themselves all the possessions, lands, and goods for the profit of those nations. And of course, you all are well familiar with the result of this being the colonization of almost the entire globe, cutting up our homelands into these political boundaries, taking people, human beings, enslaving them, taking gold and rubber, taking buffalo, taking timber, taking minerals from under the ground, water, lands, resources, for the purpose of accumulating profit. And this became almost uplifted as a sacred or holy idea with manifest destiny, right? That it was somehow the God-given right. And of course, we know well that this is an abominable evil, that there is nothing right or pure or good or true about it. But this was the ethos, and it still maintains this ethos in the property law of the United States. You know, starting in the starting in the 1800s with the courts upholding this idea of the doctrine of discovery until most recently in 2005, when the Oneida Nation is trying to reclaim some of its unceded territories under, in blessed memory, right? But Justice Bader Ginsburg upholding again the doctrine of discovery, that whenever a white Christian puts down a flag, that land is no longer belonging to Indigenous people. And so you have 12 million Black people stolen from their lands coming to the United States, where blood has already been spilled, for generations. And when we think about the history of land in this country, this history of extraction of land and extraction of labor is not over. It continues in different forms. And so I'll just give you a few examples of that. One example is that, after the end of chattel slavery in 1865, when Black folks were free on paper, we of course, our ancestors wanted to be able to have homes and to grow food. In fact, when Black people Black clergy met with the Union Army and were asked what could Reconstruction look like, all they said is, all we need are homes and the ground beneath them so we can plant fruit trees and tell our children these are yours. But there was no 40 acres and a meal didn't happen, right? So the only way people could be on land was to continue this neo-slavery of sharecropping. So folks ended up for generations saving little bits of money, and eventually by 1910 had purchased in meager parcels 16 million acres of land collectively. That's about the size of half of Connecticut. And it was a big deal for the Black community. It was actually the peak of Black land autonomy. But the Ku Klux Klan, the White Citizens Council, and the Whitecaps punished these people for the audacity to leave the plantation and own their own farms by murdering 4,500 people by lynching and driving them out of their homes and stealing their land. And so this proceeded until the mid-1900s. The federal government was supportive of this land extortion, and a lot of the people in the Klan are sheriffs and deputies and public officials. But even more insidious in some ways, the federal government, in the form of the US Department of Agriculture, would not give loans or any assistance to these Black farmers, and so effectively drove them off their land and co-signed, this expulsion. And so, I want to get to the part about what we're doing about it in the co-op, but just really want to underscore the point that this yearning for land is deep and enduring, that this knowledge of how to be in right relationship with land is our Indigenous heritage on all continents, and that the settler colonial state is really set up to dispossess people of color from land. And this is in policy, from the doctrine of discovery to the attempted genocide of Turtle Island Indigenous people, the Land Ordinance Act of 1785, the Indian Removal Act of 1830, the 1823 McIntosh case, the Treaty of Hidalgo, the Homestead Act, the Alien Land Acts, the abandonment of 40 acres and a mule, the terror campaign of the mid-1900s, the Texas Rangers, air property law, and on and on and on. It is baked into the very DNA of policy of the United States to make it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for us to hold onto land, which is why, if you look at the agricultural land in the United States in the last census, 98% of the land that can grow our food is owned by one racial group, European descendant, white identified people, 98% of the value of the rural land. And it's no accident of history. And this map just shows how that correlates into loss of wealth for communities, which then translates into loss of access to food, home security, the ability to be safe from police violence. The inability to hold on to land has immense repercussions in community. So this is the context that we find ourselves, right? And so when my family, Jonah, Nashima, Emmett, and I, now 15 years ago, we're living in the south end of Albany, New York, which is a community under food apartheid, meaning, in essence, it's very easy to get McDonald's and hard liquor, and not possible to get okra, tomatoes, kale, onions, essentially. So when we were living in this community and friends of ours who lived on the block found out that we knew how to farm, they started saying, well, when are you going to start the farm for the people? Because we really want to be able to eat fresh food. So that's what the original impetus that drove us to go ahead and start Soulfire Farm, but very quickly started to realize like all of these systemic issues that needed to be addressed. It wasn't as simple as grow food, distribute food. We had to be looking at how do we hold lands in a good way? How do we educate the learners who are coming to the farm in a way that they go forth and take care of the earth and their communities? How do we address these systemic barriers? So as we were thinking about the lands in particular, and again, especially for those who joined late, so we're on 80 acres of land in the mountains of upstate New York. It's Mohican territory outside of Albany, the capital of New York State. So originally, right, we just did what a lot of folks do. We signed papers, you pay money, you have a deed, private property. We always had a dream of something else, but we didn't really know how. So this is a journey of study. So first we started to say, well, if we look at indigenous, and I'm using indigenous expansively here because my people are indigenous both from West Africa, Tohono region, also Taino from the Caribbean. And we have people on our team who are indigenous to Turtle Island, but also who are indigenous ethnic groups in East Asia, like the Bugis people, parts of China. And so some generalizations here, but I hope that you will understand the spirit it's coming from. So looking at the difference between a European model of individual ownership versus community control, private property, right, versus a use right that's subject to production and being in right relationship, a deed providing ownership in European model, the inheritance of ownership and the full rights of owners, like possessing, excluding others, selling, building, mineral and water, occupy, control, versus the conditional rights in our indigenous systems where you may be able to use the land, but it doesn't mean that the mineral and water are yours or that it automatically goes to whoever you want it to, that there's some community control. And I would add in here as well, at least in Dahomey region and in Yoruba region, the land gets a vote, and we'll get to how we incorporated that. So the land actually gets to speak and say what she wants to have happen. So we also were studying, how, especially in the Black community, have folks tried to do cooperative land tenure and try to carry forward these models. And some examples would be the Koinonia farm in Americus, Georgia. This was a pecan business that was a civil rights movement space that had residential community as well as a shared farm. We looked at the constructivist movement in India. This was Mahatma Gandhi, where 3 million acres of land were given over to self-help villages. We looked at the beloved New Communities Land Trust that just celebrated their 50th anniversary. I got to go right before the pandemic. 6,000 acre cooperative farm that 500 Black families who were former sharecroppers came together to create. We looked at Fannie Lou Hamer, a Black civil rights organizer who had cooperative freedom farms. And Fannie Lou Hamer, my favorite quote of all time from Fannie Lou Hamer, she said, "When you have 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, nobody can push you around or tell you what to say or do." So this idea of like land really being tied to our freedom. So building on these ideas, this is what we tried to do. And I will say, what it's summed up in this tidy little slideshow, but it was really, really hard. Like what we term white man's law is not set up a lot of times to do these things. And so you end up pushing against, you end up pushing against a lot of structures. But anyway, I will share, it's lagging a little bit. I will share the overarching goals that we had with the, with the collective is we wanted to make sure that everyone who was stewarding the lands would have shared decision making. We wanted cooperative rather than private ownership. We wanted a way to permanently protect our wildlands, farmlands, and the cultural uses to make sure that the people who live here could pass their home to their children, honor the rights of nature, honor the rights of the Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohican Nation, who are the original stewards of the land, be able to welcome additional families, and continue to have our nonprofit organization meet its educational goals. And so the nonprofit actually preceded the co-op. And just for context, for those who don't know as much about Soulfire Farm, it is an Afro-Indigenous centered community farm working to end racism in the food system. And so we grow a lot of food using methods that improve the earth, like putting the carbon back in the soil, increasing biodiversity. And this food that we grow goes at no cost to people who need it in our region. So this is just a picture of some of the food, a picture of some of the distribution of the food. And then we also run training programs for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian aspiring farmers who want to do natural farming, cultural farming. So we have everything from day-long to week-long to apprenticeships where people come through. Here's some folks, hanging some onions in the barn that we grew at the farm. And we support urban farmers as well by setting them up with, raised bed gardens and plants. And then do a lot of organizing. So the timeline for how we were thinking about transitioning the land from private to cooperative ownership is this. In 2006, we just bought the land. Our family bought the land, right? With all the complexities therein. In 2010, after 4 years of building our house from scratch, it's like straw bale timber frame, passive solar, building the soil from very degraded, we were able to move in. So we open as a family farm. In 2015, we start to transition to a community farm. So we form the nonprofit, we form a community board of directors, and we began the research process of how do we have an entity to hold the land. So at first it was just a lease agreement, right? So the private ownership leasing to the nonprofit. And we added some more woodland to protect the buffer. And then by 2019, so 3-4 years of research, we were able to actually form our cooperative. It's called Soulfire Farmland Stewardship Collective, and put the land into that cooperative. And I'll get into a little bit details of how that's set up. And then in 2020, just last year, we signed over a cultural respect easement to the Mohican Nation, which grants perpetual use rights to any citizen of the Mohican Nation for all time to use the land. Without any financial obligation. So this is a map of how the land looks. It's like north is up here, so it's a long rectangle. And you can see that we've designated a whole area in yellow as commons. These commons are forever wild. So it's a place where the bears live. We have coyote. We have a lot of barred owl, green and blue heron, hawks, fisher cats, porcupine. So this is their home. And so we have a protection agreement for that. And then there's an area that's used by the nonprofit organization who's one member of the co-op, that's in red, the farmland and some of the buildings. And then we have areas where residents who may or may not be affiliated with a nonprofit build their homes. And you'll notice that the human development is very clustered. And the reason for that is that it's more efficient to share utilities. It's easier to help each other out, but it also helps us maintain a contiguous wildlands. We're in something called the Rensselaer Plateau. So there's many thousands of acres of habitat in this mountain. And it's very important not to break it up, because then the bears can't migrate and use their range. So we're trying to do our part to maintain this plateau. So anytime you create a corporation, which a co-op is, for better or worse, you have to have a legal purpose. And so the legal purpose is to promote land sovereignty for peoples impacted by discrimination, colonization, displacement, and oppression. And as a co-op, to be legally a co-op, you have to have these 7 principles. To be classified as a co-op federally, which is a specific category with tax, different tax code. So you have to have voluntary and open membership with no discrimination, democratic governance, economic participation by members, autonomy of the company, provide education and training, cooperate with other cooperatives, and have a concern for the community. So you got to put that in your operating agreements if you're going to be a co-op. So, the reason it took so long, and I won't bore you with this because depending where you are, you have different laws, but there's a lot of regulations governing how we deal with lands. If there's a nonprofit involved, you have to be very careful about something called private benefit. You can't have a nonprofit benefiting an individual. It has to only benefit the community, right? And this can get really tricky if you're living where you work. I mentioned the housing cooperative have certain guidelines. Every state has its guidelines. There's something in New York called the securities law, which when you're trying to share land with people, they think you're like a developer that's doing some sort of like housing development, and then they want to make you pay all this money, and trying to tell them, no, we're not a developer, we're a community. You know, you have to get all these variances. That took years. Every town has its zoning. The health department is very confused. If you try to share a septic system, they don't like that, so you have to get the variances. Your property taxes are complicated by being a co-op. Capital gains tax is complicated by being a co-op because they don't understand that it's your primary residence if you share. Getting a mortgage when you're sharing can be very challenging. So there's all of these things we addressed, but the reason that it took us so many years 4 years to form the co-op from intention to signing the paper is every time we thought we were ready, we'd find out about like a new law, you know, to navigate. So I don't say this to intimidate you. I say it more to like be gentle with yourself and give yourself patience. And also, at least in New York, in the Northeast, there are many law schools that have a commitment to providing pro bono legal services to community projects. And so we were helped by Pace University to navigate this process. Otherwise, it would probably be too daunting for us. So what we ended up doing with our co-op, there are currently actually 10 members of our co-op, and we make decisions by consensus. But if we can't reach consensus after 2 meetings, we can go to supermajority vote. And one little sort of fun legal thing that we figured out is we wanted people to be able to have a vote even if they weren't ready to, quote, buy a share in the co-op. So in New York State, anyway, you can do something called a manager managed corporation, where you essentially have like a decision-making body, almost like a board that doesn't necessarily have a financial investment. So anyway, we did that so that everyone who lives on the land can still have a vote, even if they're not quite ready to buy in, like if they're in employee housing or they're just trying it out. The probably most exciting and fun thing that also took a good year is we wanted our co-op to give the land veto power. And because the government does not understand that the land is a person, this was very difficult to write into the legal structure. We were looking at Manuman precedent, the rights of the Manuman rice. We were looking at precedent from New Zealand, where they have a river that's a person. And what we ended up being able to do is build in a structure whereby every year we do a technology called a divination. So in Yoruba tradition and also in Dahomey tradition, we have a way of talking to the land using instruments that you cast, and then you can ask questions and get answers. So we have a structure where every year we'll ask the land if the things that we're planning and doing are in alignment with what she wants. And if it's no, then we'll go back and make a different plan and then ask the land again. And so we were eventually able to figure out a structure to be sure that the land would have veto power. This is a little too I'll just breeze through some of this because, you know, it might be too technical, but we did also have to come up with whole structures of how do you become a member? So like an application process, how much do people pay? Something that was really important to us is making sure that the land should not be speculated upon, in my opinion. So the land is not like a resource that you own and that you make money on as an investment. But when you build a home or something on the land, it does make sense that you would want, if you left, to be able to like recover some resource. So essentially we had to make a formula that said, like, you know, here's how much you put into the land, you can get that back plus a cost of living adjustment, but not like a market value adjustment, if that makes sense. And then, as I mentioned, in 2020, after many years of friendship building, we were able to grant our cultural respect easement, and we're also in the process of putting an agricultural and conservation easement on the land, because it's important to us that these purposes last beyond the lifetimes of the people who are currently here. That bare habitat stays bare habitat, that these beautiful, you know, gardens that have pollinator species, that stays agricultural and so forth. And so this is a picture of me in Wisconsin visiting our friends at the Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohican Nation, and we also work with them on a lot of seed rematriation. We work with Mohican Nation on stopping the pipelines that would desecrate their sacred sites here in the homelands. Working on some language reclamation. You'll see if you come visit our farm, maybe by a year or two from now, you'll see all of our signs will be Munsee Mohican as well as English and Spanish. So I already mentioned some resale, some things about resale. And just want to say that in this whole process, you know, this is one example of a co-op. Obviously, in addition to housing co-ops, you have food co-ops, you can have producer co-ops, like so many kinds. You can have credit unions, which is a form of co-op. In our case, particularly, it's a housing and land co-op. But I really want to say that, you know, this process where we're still learning would not be possible without all of the people who shared with us, just like we're sharing with you right now about what they did, what worked, what didn't work. So folks like Acorn Community, the Krobo community in West Africa, the Native Land Conservancy, Ramona Peters organization in Massachusetts, Berkshire Land Trust, and so on. So I will pause there. I'm throwing up my Instagram and my website so you can check out more, but I'm excited to have a conversation with folks. So if you want to like pop some questions in the chat, or I don't know if you're allowed to come off mute and talk, but I would love to hear, you know, what you all are thinking about co-ops and how we can support each other.
I have a quick question, Leah. Is your land in trust?
Our land is not owned by a land trust, it's owned by a housing cooperative.
Okay.
Land trusts are great too. And it was one of the solutions that we looked at for sure. We were on the founding, we are one of the founders of the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, which I'll just speak about very briefly. So just fun story. So this idea came out of, there was a lot of us who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color farmers who had potlucks in the wintertime, because it's very lonely and cold being a farmer in New England winter. And we share good food and talk, and very quickly realized that almost nobody in the group owned their land. Like everyone was either a wage farmer or they had these short-term leases. And so we're thinking, wow, we really need to do something about this because everyone had land insecurity. So we formed the land trust, and the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust its executive director is Stephanie Morningstar, who's Oneida Turtle Clan. And the essential model is that people will reach out to the land trust and say, we have land, we want to do the right thing and give it back. And so the Native community to which the land pertains has the first right to claim it. And if they don't want to claim it, or they want a cultural respect easement rather than putting it into their trust, then Northeast Farmers of Color will arrange for a Black, Indigenous, or person of color farmer to do a long-term lease on that land and then do a cultural respect easement. So that's the essential model, but you can check out nefolklandtrust.org to learn more about that. It's a really cool organization doing a lot of good work.
There was another question from Millie, and Millie wanted to know if you could talk more about the cultural easement with Mohican Nation. What does it look like to share use rights?
Sure, and I'm happy to actually send the redacted document if you want to send things out later. But so essentially, in the commons area, which is about 70 acres of the land, any citizen of the Mohican Nation can come on the land and use it for camping, hiking, foraging, gathering, hunting, fishing, any use that doesn't harm the land, essentially, and at no cost and for all time. And we just have a notification clause of like giving a heads up to the residents that they're coming. So that's the basic cultural respect easement. They can look a lot of different ways. And the best person, the person who created the concept for the Northeast is Ramona Peters, Mashpee Wampanoag at the Native Land Conservancy. So we used her templates. There's another organization that is innovating with it too, called the First Light Learning Journey. And they're in Maine working with Wabanaki Confederacy and doing a lot of cultural respect easements. Usually they are done on land that's already in conservation, because I can't remember the statistic, but it was really startling in Maine. It was like, I don't know, some huge chunk of the state is like owned by land trusts, conservation land trusts, compared to a very, very small percentage of the state that's quote owned by the native people. And so they're trying to put cultural respect easements on all of this land trust owned land so that the indigenous folks can use the land in its historical ways, not harm, not doing harm to it or like creating skyscrapers or anything, but having the rights to the land. So that's where we learn the concept from. And I think it's not land back. So I'm not saying that that is the solution, but we had offered to the Mohican Nation if they wanted to own the land or be a member of the co-op. And they're like, we're in Wisconsin. Like, we're not the only lands that we want to own. There's like one particular part of like Skodak and Pascony Islands where their sacred fires were. And they're like, we're trying to get that, but we can't manage, like we're taxes and you all manage it. And we just want, when we come on our homelands trips every 2 years, we want to be able to like, know we can use the land. So they'll be coming next year, COVID allowing, and they do like a big camp out and, visit the homelands and do some cultural touring and that type of thing. So that's what it'll probably look like practically, is like coming out and camping and hanging out. I'm curious too, if anyone's willing to share in the chat or otherwise, like what type of co-ops that you are creating or hoping to create, because you may have ideas to share, or I might have like other organizations that do that I can suggest as well. I think we were talking before people got on about how important it is as we think about what businesses we want to create, how we want to hold our land, that we're looking at our cultural wisdom and not just automatically replicating, what the state would offer us. And so this is a great opportunity. If you have ideas to share or questions, even if it's not about housing co-ops, we can share knowledge.
Hi, everybody. I think this was really good, but it also gets to be really overwhelming. And I think it's hard to even come up with the right questions, but I guess one of the questions I had was where, if you've heard of this type of co-op happening and this type of land trust, where land is already in trust by the federal government, like for reservation land. And if there's ever been the transfer out of the federal trust land into a land co-op, I suspect there hasn't been. But in that sort of case, what sort of, is there any leverage, or what kind of leverage would there be for residents to start things like farming co-ops or housing co-ops, so that they can kind of get away from the laws that are governing them now, that we know are, they don't work, for one, but they just don't hold the same values that the people in the community hold. And so how can you, instead of trying to work within that system, is there a way to say, okay, we're going to start this this co-op, it's going to maybe, layer another layer, but we want to have this, this inherent power of how we manage the land. And in addition to, so I'm from Arizona, so the Southwest, and so there's a lot of water issues here. So we want to be able to, manage the water systems, like the putting in water catchment systems and things like that, that where we know it's needed. But to have the tribe come in and do that is like, 10, 20-year process. Like, how can we use co-ops to be able to do that ourselves?
If anyone else can speak to this better than me, please do, because it's not my area of expertise, and I don't know of any examples of land being taken out of trust and into like a land trust or a co-op. I imagine that would be a legal nightmare, but I do know of Indigenous folks in our area who sort of sidestep it. And again, it can get really controversial, right? Because people, these are sovereign governments. And then when certain members of the nation are like, we're not really going to rock with you, we're going to go create our own organization, our land trust, our co-op or nonprofit, it can create conflict in the community. And so I'm not going to name names, but I'm thinking of one particular example where, there is a state recognized group of Native group that has its government, its casino, its things, right? And then some of its younger disaffected tribal members don't like how it's going, and so they left the reservation. They form a nonprofit organization, land trust. They got their own land, and they started doing cultural programming, building houses, doing the whole thing. They get a lot of support from some community members, but other community members are really upset with them that they're not staying with the, you get it. So, and I feel like as someone who's not from that community, I can't really say anything about it, but I can't make any type of judgment, but I imagine it's like pretty complicated, right? To do that. I don't know. Can anyone else speak to that? Oh, you're muted, Pamela.
Jessica, to take land out of federal trust, you know how long it takes it to get into trust. By the time your grandkids are, adults, it may be released. But I think things are improving with the BIA, with the new leadership that we have. But one of the things that I've recommended, and depending on what community you're from, up here in Minnesota, the tribes, most of our reservations outside of Red Lake Nation, all their land is held in common. They opted never to take allotment land. So their whole reservation is intact. But most of the other, reservations in Minnesota, they're checkerboarded. So people stole land through people not paying their taxes. And then the federal government passed a law, they didn't have to pay taxes. But by that time, all that damage had been done. So I've been working with a group of women on one of the communities, and they want to start a housing cooperative and they want to manage the land, but the tribe didn't see a sense of urgency about doing more housing. So what my recommendation was for them to look for a piece of land that is on fee land that they could purchase, and then they could do their cooperative on that land. And maybe through that example, their tribe can see, oh, wow, here's a housing cooperative. This is another way that we can work together. And then another group that you might really want to talk to is San Javier at Tohono, because they came together. They were all the allottees in one of their districts. They came together and in partnership with the tribe as well, they formed the cooperative, but they won a massive landside lawsuit over water. And they were actually able to protect their water that had been, it was really being stolen from them and being sent into Tucson to fill people's pools and water golf courses. So they won a huge lawsuit. So there is strength in numbers. And sometimes as the people, I used to have a bumper sticker that said, if the people lead, the leaders will follow. And I really do believe that sometimes it, and I've shared this, I think, with Justin, but when I was teaching years ago, when I showed up at school, the principal had everybody got an arrow, and he had them custom made for everybody, all the way down to the people that were cleaning the classrooms, everything. And so he took one arrow, he broke it over his knee. Then he had us all, there were like about 40, 45 of us on staff. We gave our arrow back, and he had this huge bundle of arrows, and he tried to break it and he couldn't break it. And so that's whenever I think of when we unify our voices, that's when we have strength. I don't use the word power. It really bothers me. I think it's just a negative thing, but for me it is. But that's where we have strength, is when we unify our voices. So maybe there's people in your community that you can come together with around water and find a way that, and again, I don't know what community you're from, and if your land is held in common, you may have a hard time doing that. I hope that helps, Jessica.
Yeah, I love that quote. When the people lead, the leaders will follow. I absolutely love that. I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. So I'm on Navajo, along the Little Colorado River. We just started a co-op called Doko Oslid Hoja Agricultural Co-op, and it's brand new. So we're just kind of organizing right now, but it's a lot of really small farmers who really just farm just to provide food for their own families and their own communities, but know that and have been able to, get back to that lifestyle over the past few years. And so where we're at now is trying to, I hate this term, but it's scaling that to support other small farmers and to bring other farmers into the co-op. And really it's that idea of the strength in numbers, because if there's enough farmers, and our water rights, we haven't settled our water rights with the state of Arizona yet. And so when Navajo and Hopi farmers come together, that's where the strength really, in terms of water rights, really is going to be. And so I found it very interesting when we had our meeting last week, that you have all of these small farmers and they're farming on their own, home site leases, which on Navajo, it's 1 acre leases. But the concern they kept talking about was water rights. And it's like you have this really big, huge issue that, and when I go to meetings with council delegates and these elected officials, unless that meeting is specifically about water rights, you don't hear them talk about it at all. And so it's really interesting that you have these farmers who they're not elected officials, they're not, they're farmers, and yet that's their main concern, is their water rights, which is, it just kind of goes to show that that's something that's forever going to impact our people from, many generations from now. And so you just kind of see that connection with the land and with the water. And so we're trying to figure out, I know there's a lot of legal issues ahead of us. We're just kind of at the beginning of that. I think that with where we are, we've been able to get away with farming and doing our own thing for a while. But the drought is definitely going to force the water rights issue to a head. And it's like the farmers are going to be the ones to save us. So thank you.
So powerful what you're saying. And when you say that water issues and farmers will be the ones to save us, something we're noticing, we have the opposite problem here in the Northeast with the flooding. But it's the farmers who are practicing these regenerative and indigenous ways of growing that are more resilient. They withstand the flood, where they withstand the drought, the heavy winds and storms in these ways, and can still produce food for the community, right? So you're making me think about that too, the mitigation piece. There's a question, thank you. There's a question, I'll read it off from the chat. It says, we're trying to incubate a farm-based co-op and purchase land together among 8 Black families. Yay, that's great. Especially interested in how you built relationships with Indigenous folks in your region. We are with our space in Southern Prince George's County and would actually love to be part of creating something similar to what you've done at Soulfire. They started a bulk buying club eventually hope to build a co-op ecosystem that's mutually supportive. That's so amazing. Congratulations. Building relationships. Well, I'll just be really honest here. I think that sometimes it can be hard for folks who have been historically and currently marginalized by the state to build relationships with each other, because conversations can quickly go to what we call oppression Olympics, where it's like, who's more hurt and who deserves the tiny piece of pie that's left over. And that can be very challenging, because in the settler colonial state has actually set up those divisions, whether you look at, the slaveholding amongst certain indigenous communities, whether you look at the Buffalo Soldiers, where African people were granted freedom in exchange for, being soldiers out in the West, whether you look at what was happening with the slaughter of Nipmuc and Massachusetts men in the Northeast, and how indigenous women were told that if they married Black men, they'd lose their land rights, and so created this anti-Blackness. There's like all of these examples, right, that would separate us. And I was naive in the beginning to think, oh, Black folks, indigenous folks, Asian folks, we just have all this thing in common where we're trying to get free with our natural collaborators. And that was not the right perspective. It was actually really important to recognize all of the hurts and harms that happen between communities, both imagined and real, to recognize the ways that we didn't have deep understanding of our very different struggles, to do some self-education. And so for us, our community is mixed. It's mostly Black, but there are indigenous folks, Asian folks, Latinx folks who are also indigenous. But we did a lot of just relationship building, like getting invited, to an event, showing up at the event, bringing a gift, getting to know, Chief Holly of the Nipmuc, getting to know other folks, and bringing gifts from our land, and letting the relationship evolve really organically before like making deals, and being willing to be humble, being willing to ask questions, to really not, just like as Black people, it's quite obnoxious when like white folks assume what solidarity looks like, or like come into our communities and tell us what to do, or say ignorant things, like they don't even know what, I don't know, some basic Black history. Like, to remember that in doing these cross-cultural relationship building, to be humble, to educate ourselves, to ask questions, to let indigenous folks be in the lead when it comes to issues of land, has been really important. And it's not to say that it's not without challenges, but it's been really beautiful, especially between Soulfire and the Mohican Nation over time. I actually have a meeting with their cultural preservation officer tomorrow, because they're helping us. So grateful with like our 5-year plan as a co-op to make sure it's accountable to the Mohican Nation. So that's like such a gift, right? And every week I bring them food from our farm, including the crops that they ask us to grow that are like traditional Mohican crops. We grow a whole lot of different things. So yeah, relationship, I don't know if that's helpful. It's just like speed of trust, relationship building is like a slow and steady process that involves authentic human connection. But I would love to stay in touch if you want to reach out, exchange information, and, I'd love to support in any way with your project. I think we might have time for like one more question if anyone has one.
Why don't you let the folks know about the special scholarship that you guys have? I think that's such an amazing program that you've developed, and I'm sure that she's been coming to our to all of the calls. We just appreciate her so much, and she's out in your, well, not quite your area, but she's out there in the East Coast. So.
Sure. So one of the programs that Soulfire just launched is called the Braiding Seeds Fellowship. And it is a collaboration between Black-led farming organizations in the Northeast and the Southeast that supports 10 farmers every year who are at the beginning stage of their journey with a very generous stipend, a mentor, professional development, and cohort gatherings to help them get their farms and co-ops and projects off the ground. So our first cohort in the Braiding Seeds Fellowship just started in July. And then applications will open for the next cohort probably sometime in January, February, and then they'll start again. So by the end, we have funding for 5 years of the program, but I think it will renew, but we know for sure 5. So by the end, that means 10 a year. So 50 farmers will have gotten like a year's pay and a mentor and all this help and support to start their farms. Because as you know, it's not that we lack heart, it's not that we lack ancestral knowledge, it's not that we lack passion and work ethic. It's really very much about needing these resources like land and capital and technical support to get these things off the ground. So at least for now, it is like states that touch the Atlantic Ocean or its tributaries. That's open to revision, mostly because we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin. But at least for now, that's where Braiding Seeds Fellowship is. But regardless of whether it expands territorially, it's important to share that all of the like back end organizational stuff that went into it, we're happy to share. So if someone gets excited about starting a similar program in the Midwest or the West Coast or the Southwest, we would share, you know, freely any information that would help, you know, get that off the ground.
We want to thank you so much, Wado Miigwech, for presenting and sharing your story, your beautiful story, Leah, and all the thoughtfulness and the intention that you've put into building this cooperative and this community. And I mean, you guys, you need to visit their website and see all the things that they're doing. It's just amazing what they have built on that land. And I know those things don't happen overnight, but it's been all your hard work that has really created a beautiful village. So we just, again, just with deep gratitude, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. Truly a joy to be with you all in this sweet, intimate space. And I wish you the best, and hopefully y'all can come out to the farm when you're on the East Coast in the future. Take care.
Thank you so much, Leah. And thank you so much, Pamela, and everyone for joining us. I want to extend another thanks to Pamela standing real fast. I'm sad to say, but very proud at the same time to say that we've completed our series on Native cooperative ownership. We've been doing this since like July, and we have had some just amazing speakers over the last few months. And we're so blessed to conclude it with Leah tonight. You all are such an inspiration. And yeah, just another big thanks to Pamela for bringing in all these speakers for us. Pamela, you're.
I know, geez. I'm not supposed to be muted. But I want to thank you too for, for Center for Rural Affairs. This is a dream come true to build an archive. We've got a beautiful archive that we're building, and we hope that people will come back. Jessica, yes, they're all recorded. And so are you working with Bijiba and Candace?
Yes, I work. Well, I know Bijiba personally, so we've been trying to get working together. But yes, we definitely will be working together in the near future.
Because she has a good understanding. She's from there, and again, if there's any way, they're so hard to get a hold of. We were hoping we would have had them. They would have been our last presenter this month, but San Javier Farm Cooperative at Tohono O'odham, you really need to have a conversation with them. Okay. And hear about what they did with their lawsuit, with their water rights. And it just wasn't them, but I think having that strength in the number of voices and the tribe, it was something they all came in together and worked on. and they won it. So that was amazing.
Okay, definitely. Thank you. I think we do some work with Aho, or we do have a shared event with the Aho, I forget, I think it's a farmer's market there at Aho. So they are sort of our partners in that area or in that region.
Okay. Well, I know that Bijiba can help you and Candace, you know, over at Cooperative Catalyst. So, and when I talk to her again, I'll put a bee in her ear.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just be buzzing around saying, you need to help Jessica.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I know how busy she is. And so, and I don't know Candace. So actually, if you could send an email, that would be great.
Well, Justin, do you have Jessica's email?
I should have it in the registration information. So
And
I
I'll
can-
introduce you to Candace Quam. She's from Zuni Pueblo, and she works at Cooperative's Catalyst too.
Okay,
She's good people.
that would be awesome.
We're trying to build up a bunch of native cooperative developers. Thank you, everyone, for
right.
being here.
Yep. Thank you again. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care. Stay safe. Stay well.
Thank you.
All right. I think I'm going to end it, Pamela.
Okay.
All right. Have a great night.
All right. You too. You too.
We'll touch base soon.
Yep, we will. All right. You take care, Justin.
All right.
Night.
Good night.